In the vast emptiness of space, where stars died and civilizations rose from their ashes. One name echoed through communication channels with terror and reverence: Fleet Admiral Kale Vortan. His vessel, the Dreadnought Oblivion's Edge, cast a shadow across three prosperous sectors that had once known peace. Its silhouette against distant suns had become an omen of subjugation, a harbinger of absolute control. The year was 2374. Humanity had long since mastered faster-than-light travel, colonizing hundreds of star systems across the galaxy. Resources were plentiful but unevenly distributed, creating inevitable conflicts between developing worlds and established powers. Into this fragile balance of interstellar politics came Vortan, a military genius whose strategic brilliance was matched only by his ruthless efficiency. Sector Aegis had fallen first. Once the technological jewel of the Outer Rim, its advanced defense grid had presented a challenge that Vortan dismantled with surgical precision. 12 worlds, 63 space stations, and a population of billions now answered to the Admiral's authority. Their quantum communication arrays were repurposed to broadcast Vortan's declarations across neighboring systems. Sector Meridian followed 6 months later, rich in rare minerals and home to the galaxy's most sophisticated terraforming technologies. It had tried diplomacy before resistance. Both approaches failed against Vortan's calculated advance. The sector's governing council was replaced with military appointees loyal to the Dreadnought commander. Now, the conquest of Sector Vespera was nearly complete. Famous for its biologically diverse worlds and cultural achievements, Vespera had mounted the most organized defense yet seen. For 3 weeks, their combined fleet had managed to hold the line at the Helios Corridor, a narrow region of navigable space that served as the sector's primary entrance point. But strategic genius had prevailed once again. Vortan had divided his forces, sending a smaller contingent through the treacherous Scylla Nebula, a route considered impassable by conventional military doctrine. The unexpected flanking maneuver forced Vespera's defenders to split their attention. Within days, Vortan's forces had secured control of the sector's outer systems, methodically advancing toward the capital world of Nova Lumina. Standing on the command bridge of Oblivion's Edge, Vortan surveyed the holographic display of his latest conquest with cold satisfaction. Tall and imposing, with steel-gray hair cropped close to his scalp and eyes the color of Arctic ice, he embodied the perfect military commander. His uniform, midnight blue with silver trim, bore the insignia of his self-proclaimed rank, Supreme Commander of the Unified Sectors. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Darrow, "we're receiving a transmission from Nova Lumina. They're requesting terms of surrender." A thin smile crossed Vortan's face. "Project it." The holographic image of an older man in formal diplomatic attire appeared before them. Governor Thelion of Nova Lumini bowed his head slightly, a gesture that pleased Vortan immensely. "Admiral Vortan," the governor began, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "On behalf of the people of Sector Vespera, I formally request discussions regarding the terms of our capitulation. We ask only that civilian populations be spared unnecessary hardship." Vortan clasped his hands behind his back, savoring the moment. "Governor Thelion, your request is acknowledged. My terms are non-negotiable, but straightforward. All military assets will be surrendered intact. Planetary defense systems will be deactivated. A garrison will be established on each major world. In exchange, civilian governance will continue under my oversight. Resistance of any kind will be met with immediate and decisive response." The governor's shoulders slumped slightly. "We understand. When shall we?" A junior communications officer interrupted with unexpected urgency. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission. It's unusual." Vortan turned sharply. "Explain." "Sir, it's being broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously. Origin appears to be from Lyrian in the outer system." "Lyrian?" Vortan's brow furrowed. "The education colony. Put it through." The governor's image disappeared, replaced by what appeared to be nothing more than static at first. Then the static resolved into an image that made several bridge officers exchange confused glances. It was a drawing, crude, simplistic, rendered in what appeared to be colored wax. A child's drawing. It depicted a stick figure with a smiling face standing beside what might have been intended as a spaceship. Above them both, a yellow sun beamed down, its rays extending in uneven lines. Around the edges were smaller figures, holding hands in a circle. Silence fell across the command bridge. Vortan stared at the image, his expression unreadable. "Is this some kind of joke?" he finally asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Unknown, sir," replied the communications officer. "The signal contains no message or demands. Just this image. Trace it, find the exact source, now." "Yes, Admiral." As the communications team worked to identify the transmission's origin, Vortan found his gaze repeatedly drawn back to the childish illustration. Something about it disturbed him in ways he couldn't immediately identify. The simple lines, the bright colors, the innocent representation of human figures. It stood in stark contrast to everything his life had become. "Admiral." Senior Officer Mira Solon approached cautiously. As his second-in-command, she alone could read the subtle changes in his demeanor. "Shall we proceed with the surrender negotiations?" Vortan blinked, as if remembering himself. "Yes, of course. But I want that transmission source identified. Dispatch a reconnaissance team to Lyrian immediately." "Sir, Lyrian is a civilian education colony. Children and teachers only. It holds no strategic value." "I'm aware of what Lyrian is, Senior Officer," Vortan snapped. "Carry out my orders." Solon nodded and stepped away, but not before giving the Admiral a concerned glance. In 3 years of serving under his command, she had never seen him distracted from a conquest at its culmination point. Within an hour, a small contingent of the Dreadnought's forces was dispatched toward Lyrian, a modest planet orbiting a yellow star at the outer edge of the Vespera sector. Known across the galaxy as the Cradle of Young Minds, Lyrian housed educational facilities for gifted children from dozens of worlds. Its neutrality had been respected even during the most heated conflicts of the past century. As reports from the reconnaissance team began filtering in, Vortan retreated to his private quarters. The room was sparse, militaristic in its efficiency. No personal effects adorned the walls or surfaces. Nothing to suggest the man behind the legend. He accessed his personal terminal and pulled up the strange transmission again. The childish drawing filled his screen, those simple lines and bright colors somehow more vivid in the dimness of his quarters. A memory stirred, long buried, unwelcome. A small boy sitting at a table, colored wax sticks scattered before him. A woman's voice, gentle but strained. "Draw something happy. Kale. Draw something you wish for." Vortan's hand moved to his temple, massaging away a sudden pressure. That boy had died decades ago, along with any foolish wishes he might have harbored. In his place stood a conqueror, a strategist unmatched across known space. His communication panel chimed, breaking the moment. "Admiral," came Senior Officer Solon's voice. "The reconnaissance team has reached Lyrian. They've identified the source of the transmission. It originated from the Central Education Hub, specifically from Classroom 7, Primary Division. Any sign of resistance or military presence?" "None, sir." "As expected, it's exactly what it appears to be, a school for children." Vortan considered this information. "Have the team bring whoever is responsible for the transmission to the Oblivion's edge for questioning." A pause. "Sir, according to the team, the transmission was sent by a child, a 6-year-old girl." For the second time that day, silence fell around Kale Vortan. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, controlled. "Bring her, and whoever helped her send that transmission." "Admiral, with all due respect." "That will be all, Senior Officer." The communication ended. Vortan remained seated, staring at the drawing that had somehow penetrated the most sophisticated military blockade in human history, and reached his command bridge at the exact moment of his triumph. Coincidence or something else? As the Oblivion's Edge adjusted its position to intercept the returning reconnaissance vessel, activity continued across the massive Dreadnought. Crew members carried out their duties with practiced efficiency, but word of the strange transmission had spread. Rumors passed in whispers between shifts. Some said it was a new form of psychological warfare. Others suggested it might be a coded message from resistance fighters. None suspected it had affected their commander. None except Dr. Ren Farley. As the ship's military psychologist, Farley had made studying Vortan his personal project. Not officially, of course. The Admiral would never submit to psychological evaluation. But 3 years of careful observation had given Farley insights into the man that perhaps no one else possessed. When he heard about the transmission and Vortan's unusual reaction, Farley accessed the ship's secure communications log. The image appeared on his screen, and immediately he understood why it might have disturbed someone like Vortan. Innocence, he murmured to himself. The one thing he systematically destroyed across 3 sectors. The doctor's reflection was interrupted by an alert. The reconnaissance team had returned, bringing with them the source of the mysterious transmission. Farley decided to observe the interrogation. If permitted, of course. In the Dreadnought's central hangar bay, Vortan waited as the transport vessel docked. His posture was rigid, hands clasped tightly behind his back. Senior Officer Solon stood nearby, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. "Sir," she ventured, "I must formally register my concern about bringing civilians, especially a child, aboard a military vessel during active operations." "Your concern is noted, Senior Officer," Vortan replied without looking at her. "But I need to understand the purpose behind this transmission. If it's some form of code or distraction technique, we must identify who's really behind it." The transport's ramp lowered, and 2 security officers emerged, flanking a man in simple civilian clothing who held the hand of a small girl. The child appeared remarkably calm, her eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear as she took in the massive hangar bay and the imposing figure of Admiral Vortan. "Welcome to the Oblivion's Edge," Vortan said, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. "I am Admiral Kyle Vortan. You have sent a transmission that interrupted military communications during a critical operation. Explain yourselves." The man, clearly the girl's father, stepped forward protectively. "My name is Elin Terrace. I'm a teacher at Lyrian Central Education Hub. This is my daughter, Lyra. There's been a misunderstanding. Admiral, the transmission wasn't meant as interference." "Then what was its purpose?" Vortan demanded. To everyone's surprise, it was the little girl who answered. "It was for the stars," she said, her voice small but clear in the cavernous hangar. Vortan found himself looking directly at the child. She had dark, curly hair pulled back from a round face, and eyes that seemed too knowing for her years. "Explain," he said, his tone softening involuntarily. Elin Terrace knelt beside his daughter. "Lyra, tell the Admiral about your project." The girl nodded. "We were learning about space communication. Teacher Nari told us that our voices and pictures can travel through the stars if we use the right machines. She let each of us send a drawing into space." She looked up at Vortan without a trace of fear. "I drew people being happy together under the same sun. Did you like it?" Vortan felt something twist inside him, a sensation so unfamiliar that it took him moments to identify it as shame. Before him stood a child who had sent a message of peace and unity into the void, only to have it intercepted by the galaxy's most feared warmonger. "Your transmission was received," he said stiffly. "However, it interfered with official military communications. I'm deeply sorry for any trouble caused, Admiral," Elin Terrace said quickly. "The children's projects were meant to transmit on educational frequencies only. There must have been some technical error." Senior Officer Solon stepped forward. "Or perhaps it was the work of someone hoping to create a distraction during our operations." "No," Vortan said suddenly. "No, I don't believe that was the case." He found his gaze drawn back to the child. "You said your name is Lyra?" The girl nodded. "And what did you hope would happen when you sent your drawing into space, Lyra?" I hoped someone would see it and know we want to be friends, she answered simply. Something broke inside Kale Vorton. A hairline fracture in the wall he had built around himself decades ago. For the briefest moment, he saw himself reflected in this child's eyes. And what he saw was not the conqueror of 3 sectors, but a man who had lost his way. Senior Officer Solon, he said abruptly, escort our guests to appropriate quarters. They will remain aboard until I determine there is no security risk. Yes, Admiral. As Solon led the father and daughter away, Vorton returned to the bridge, his mind uncharacteristically turbulent. The surrender negotiations with Sector Vespera awaited his attention, yet he found it difficult to focus. The image of the child's drawing kept appearing in his thoughts, alongside fragments of memory he had long suppressed. Hours later, as ship's night fell and the bridge operated on reduced staffing, Vorton sat alone in his ready room, reviewing status reports. A notification appeared on his terminal, a message from Dr. Ren Farley requesting permission to speak with him regarding the Lyrian visitors. Normally, Vorton would have dismissed such a request. The ship's psychologist was necessary for crew mental health, but the Admiral had always kept the man at arm's length. Tonight, however, something prompted him to grant the request. Farley arrived promptly, a tall man with kind eyes that seemed at odds with his role on a warship. Thank you for seeing me, Admiral. Make it brief, Doctor. We're in the final stages of securing Sector Vespera. Of course. Farley took the offered seat. I wanted to discuss our young visitor and her father. I've spoken with them briefly as part of standard security protocol. And, do you believe they pose some threat to this vessel? Farley smiled slightly. No, Admiral. Quite the opposite. The child, Lyra, is exactly what she appears to be. A 6-year-old student participating in a class project. Her father is genuinely bewildered by the attention his daughter's drawing has received. Then why are you here, Doctor? Because I'm curious about your interest in them. Farley leaned forward slightly. In 3 years, I've never known you to be distracted from a military objective, especially not by something as inconsequential as a child's artwork. Vorton's eyes narrowed. You're overstepping, Doctor. Perhaps, Farley acknowledged. But as this ship's psychologist, it's my duty to note significant behavioral changes in key personnel. Your reaction to this transmission has been unprecedented. For a long moment, Vorton considered having the man removed from his ready room. Instead, he found himself asking, Have you seen the drawing? Yes. A simple, innocent depiction of people living harmoniously. The kind of image children across human history have created. And that doesn't strike you as remarkable, that across thousands of years and light years of distance, children still draw the same hopes? Farley studied the Admiral with new interest. I find it profoundly remarkable. Yes, I'm just surprised that you do as well. Vorton turned away, looking out the viewport at the stars beyond. I was a child once, Doctor. Before I was this. He gestured vaguely at his uniform, at the ship around them. We all were, Admiral. Not like this. Not with... Vorton stopped himself, suddenly aware of how much he was revealing. Thank you for your report on our guests. Doctor, you're dismissed. Farley stood, but paused before leaving. Admiral, may I make a suggestion? Speak with the child again. Not as an interrogator, but as a person. You might find it illuminating. After Farley left, Vorton remained at the viewport, his reflection ghostly against the backdrop of stars. When had he last spoken to a child? Not as Admiral Vorton, not as a conqueror or strategist, but simply as a human being. He couldn't remember. The next morning, as the Dreadnought maintained its position above Nova Lumini, Vorton made an unexpected request. He asked that Lyra and her father join him in the ship's observation deck, a space normally reserved for strategic planning that offered a spectacular view of surrounding space. They arrived escorted by Senior Officer Solon, who had clearly taken it upon herself to ensure their comfort. Lyra wore a simple blue dress, her hair braided neatly. while her father appeared more rested but still wary. "Thank you for coming," Vortan said formally. "Please, sit." He gestured to comfortable chairs arranged near the viewport. Elin Terrace guided his daughter to a seat, then took one himself. "May I ask why we're here, Admiral? When will we be allowed to return home?" "Soon," Vortan assured him. "But first, I would like to speak with Lyra again, with your permission." Surprised by the request, Terrace nodded cautiously. Vortan turned his attention to the child. "Lyra, would you tell me more about your drawing, the one you sent into space?" The girl's face brightened. "It's people from different planets all being friends together. See, the big yellow sun shines on everyone the same." "And the figure near the spaceship?" Vortan asked. "That's the space traveler. They visit all the planets and tell everyone stories about the good people they've met, so nobody has to be afraid of each other." Vortan felt that strange twist inside him again. A noble purpose for space travel? "Daddy says stories help us understand each other better," Lyra continued, warming to her subject. "When you understand someone, you don't have to fight with them." Elin Terrace looked embarrassed. "Children's idealism. Admiral, I apologize if—" "No," Vortan interrupted. "Don't apologize. Your daughter speaks with remarkable clarity." He turned back to Lyra. "Would you like to see something special?" The girl nodded eagerly. Vortan touched a control panel, and the viewport's filtering reduced, revealing the full splendor of the Vespera sector spread before them. Distant stars glittered against the velvet darkness, while closer planets hung like jewels in the void. The local sun cast a golden glow across everything. "Oh," Lyra gasped, moving closer to the viewport. "It's beautiful!" "Yes," Vortan agreed quietly. "It is." He pointed to a small blue-green world visible at the system's edge. "That's Lyrian, where you're from." And there, he indicated the larger world dominating the foreground, is Nova Lumina, the capital of this sector. "Are there children there too?" Lyra asked. "Yes, millions of them." "Do they draw pictures like me?" Vortan hesitated. "I imagine they do. Yes, though perhaps not today." "Why not today?" "Because today they're afraid," he answered truthfully. Lyra looked up at him with those knowing eyes. "Afraid of what?" "Of me," Vortan said simply. "Of this ship, of what we might do." Elin Terrace stiffened, placing a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. But Lyra seemed unperturbed by the Admiral's honesty. "But you don't look scary," she said matter-of-factly. "You just look sad." The observation, delivered with a child's directness, struck Vortan like a physical blow. He found himself without a ready response, perhaps the first time in decades that words had failed him. Solon, who had been standing quietly by the door, stepped forward. "Admiral, we're receiving an urgent communication from Governor Thelian. He's requesting confirmation of the surrender protocols." Vortan nodded, grateful for the interruption. "Thank you, Senior Officer. Please escort our guests back to their quarters. I'll speak with them again later." As Solon led father and daughter away, Vortan heard Lyra ask, "Daddy, why would children be afraid of someone who looks at the stars like that?" The question followed him back to the bridge, where the business of conquest awaited. Governor Thelian's face appeared on the main screen, anxious for Vortan's final terms. Military advisors presented strategies for occupation. Logistics officers detailed resource allocation plans. Throughout it all, Vortan performed his role with outward precision. But inwardly, something fundamental had shifted. The child's drawing and her innocent questions had pierced defenses built over a lifetime. That night, alone in his quarters, Vortan did something he hadn't done in nearly 40 years. He asked the computer to display images from his personal file, a hidden folder that had traveled with him across star systems, untouched but never deleted. Pictures appeared on the screen. A small boy with serious eyes and a woman with a tired smile. A modest dwelling on a frontier world. The boy holding a colorful drawing, similar in style to the one that had reached the Oblivion's edge. The final image showed the same dwelling, but now burned and broken. No people remained in the frame. Vortan closed the file and sat in darkness, confronting memories he had buried beneath ambition and conquest. The raid that had taken his mother, the refugee camps, the military academy that had rescued him from that life, transforming grief and helplessness into discipline and power. Somewhere along that journey, the boy who drew pictures of peaceful worlds had become a man who conquered them instead. Morning found Vortan standing on the bridge as the Oblivion's Edge positioned itself for the formal surrender ceremony. Nova Lumina filled the main view screen, a world of breathtaking beauty now in the shadow of his dreadnought. All systems at full capacity, Admiral, reported the weapons officer. Planetary defenses have been deactivated as requested. Very good. Vortan studied the display showing millions of life signs across the planet's surface, each one a person with their own story, their own drawings, their own children, perhaps. Sir, Senior Officer Solon approached, lowering her voice. The child and her father are requesting permission to observe the ceremony. Dr. Farley believes it might help them understand the situation better. Her expression suggested she thought otherwise. Vortan considered the request. Allow it. Position them where they can see but not interfere. Solon nodded, though her disapproval was evident. As preparations continued, Vortan found himself increasingly distracted. His eyes kept shifting to where Lyra and her father stood at the rear of the bridge, the child's expression solemn as she watched the activity around her. The formal communication channel opened, and Governor Thelian appeared on screen, flanked by his advisory council. All wore expressions of dignified resignation. Admiral Vortan, the governor began, on behalf of the people of Nova Lumina and all of Sector Vespera, I am prepared to formally surrender our sovereignty to your authority. As per the terms we have discussed, our defense systems are deactivated, our military stands down. This was the moment Vortan had orchestrated for months, the culmination of a campaign that would complete his dominance over 3 of the galaxy's most valuable sectors. With Nova Lumina under his control, he would command resources and strategic positions that would make him virtually untouchable. Governor Thelian, he began, his voice carrying across the bridge with practiced authority. Your cooperation is acknowledged. The terms are as follows: immediate cessation of all. A movement caught his eye. Lyra had stepped away from her father, moving toward one of the bridge's secondary view screens. On it was displayed the same drawing that had interrupted their communications earlier, kept visible by the communications team as they monitored for any similar transmissions. The child stood before her own artwork, her small hand reaching out as if to touch it. The gesture was innocent, yet somehow it froze Vortan mid-sentence. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The bridge, the governor, the imminent surrender, all receded into the background. Vortan saw only the child standing before the drawing, and suddenly he was seeing another child, decades ago, reaching toward a similar creation with the same hope and innocence. Governor Thelian's voice broke through. Admiral, are you continuing with the terms? Vortan blinked, returning to the present moment. Every eye on the bridge was turned toward him, expressions ranging from confusion to concern. Senior Officer Solon had taken a step forward, ready to intervene if needed. Admiral, she prompted quietly. Kael Vortan looked once more at the child, then at the world waiting for his judgment. 3 sectors lay in his grasp. Countless lives hung on his next words. Governor Thelian, he said at last, his voice changed somehow. I am reconsidering the terms. A murmur ran through both sides of the communication. Solon's eyes widened. Sir, she whispered urgently. Vortan raised a hand for silence. Governor, I propose an alternative arrangement. Sector Vespera will retain its autonomy. The Oblivion's Edge and all forces under my command will withdraw to the sector boundary. Stunned silence greeted this announcement. The governor stared in disbelief. Admiral, I don't understand. Are you declining our surrender? I am rejecting the premise that it is necessary. Vortan replied. Furthermore, I intend to release control of sectors Aegis and Meridian as well. Their governance will be returned to local authorities, with certain guarantees in place for sector-wide cooperation. The bridge erupted in whispers. Senior Officer Solon stepped close to Vortan, her voice low and urgent. Admiral, what are you doing? We've spent years securing these sectors. Yes, he agreed quietly. And what have we secured, Senior Officer? Fear, resentment, children who will grow up seeing the stars as something to be afraid of, rather than something to reach for. Before Solon could respond, Vortan addressed the governor again. I request a direct meeting, Governor Thelian, not for surrender terms, but to discuss a new framework for cooperation between our forces and your sectors, one based on mutual benefit rather than dominance. The governor's expression shifted from confusion to cautious hope. I would welcome such discussions, Admiral. Excellent. Expect my shuttle within the hour. Vortan out. He signaled for the communication to end, then turned to face his bewildered command staff. Admiral, Solon began, struggling to maintain composure. With all due respect, this represents a complete reversal of our strategic objectives. The crew deserves an explanation. And they will have one. Senior Officer. Vortan's gaze moved past her to where Lyra stood with her father, both watching the proceedings with wide eyes. But first, I have a promise to keep. Please prepare my shuttle for departure to Nova Lumina, and arrange for our guests to return to Lyrian safely. As the bridge crew dispersed to carry out these unexpected orders, Vortan approached Lyra and her father. For the first time in years, he felt uncertain of his words. Your daughter's drawing, he said finally. May I keep a copy of it? Elin Terrace looked at him with new understanding. Of course, Admiral, but may I ask why? Vortan knelt to Lyra's eye level, a gesture so uncharacteristic that several nearby officers stopped to stare. Because it reminded me of something important, something I had forgotten a long time ago. What did you forget? Lyra asked. That before we are conquerors or commanders or even adults, we are children first. And children see the universe as it should be, not merely as it is. He offered his hand to the girl, who took it without hesitation. Thank you for sending your drawing into space, Lyra. It found exactly who needed to see it. In the days that followed, news spread across the 3 sectors like wildfire. The feared Admiral Vortan, terror of the Outer Rim, had not only halted his conquest, but begun a systematic withdrawal of forces. Military governors were replaced with civilian authorities. Resources previously channeled into the war machine were redirected toward reconstruction and development. On Nova Lumina, negotiations proceeded with remarkable speed. Where once Vortan had demanded subjugation, he now offered alliance. The transition was not without challenges. Many under his command questioned the sudden change in direction. Some even suggested the admiral had been compromised or coerced. But those closest to him saw something else entirely. A man remembering his own humanity, piece by piece. 1 month after the surrender that never was, as it came to be called, a special ceremony was held in the Grand Assembly Hall of Nova Lumina. Representatives from all 3 sectors gathered to sign the Trilateral Cooperation Accord, a document that would replace military occupation with mutual defense and trade agreements. At the center of it all stood Admiral Kyle Vortan, his uniform modified to remove the self-appointed insignia of Supreme Commander. Beside him stood Senior Officer Mira Solon, who after initial resistance had become one of the strongest advocates for the new direction. Citizens of the 3 sectors, Vortan began, his voice carrying across the silent hall. Today marks not a surrender, but a beginning. For too long, I mistook power for strength, conquest for achievement. I believed that control over others was the ultimate goal of leadership. He paused, his gaze moving across the assembled representatives. I was wrong. True strength lies not in domination, but in cooperation. Not in forcing others to submit to our will, but in finding common purpose that elevates us all. As he spoke, A large display behind him activated, showing an image that caused a ripple of surprise through the audience. It was Lyra's drawing, now preserved as a historical document. This simple illustration, created by a child on Lyrian, accomplished what fleets of warships could not. It penetrated the defenses I had built around myself and reminded me of the person I was meant to be. Of the universe we are meant to create together. Vortan gestured to a small group seated in the front row, Elin Taris and Lyra, accompanied by Dr. Ren Farley, who had taken special interest in documenting the remarkable events. In honor of this new beginning, I propose the establishment of the Interstellar Children's Peace Initiative. Centers will be created across all 3 sectors, dedicated to preserving and amplifying the voices of our youngest citizens as we build a future worthy of their dreams. The proposal was met with thunderous applause. As the ceremony concluded and the formal documents were signed, Vortan found himself approached by Governor Thelian. "A remarkable transformation, Admiral," the governor observed. "Many still can't quite believe it." "Including myself at times," Vortan admitted. "If I may ask, what will you do now? After commanding the most powerful warship in known space, what next challenge awaits Kale Vortan?" The Admiral's gaze drifted to where Lyra was showing her new drawing to a group of officials. This one depicted the Oblivion's Edge, surrounded not by weapons fire, but by stars and planets of many colors. "I believe I'll become a student again, Governor. There's much I need to relearn." In the years that followed, the 3 sectors flourished under their new cooperative framework. The Dreadnought Oblivion's Edge was repurposed as a peacekeeping vessel and diplomatic hub, its weapons systems partially decommissioned in favor of expanded scientific facilities. Admiral Vortan remained its commander, but with a new mission: establishing dialogue between formerly hostile regions and extending the principles of the Trilateral Accord to neighboring sectors. Under his guidance, the Interstellar Children's Peace Initiative grew into one of the most respected institutions in known space. And in the Interstellar Historical Museum on Nova Lumina, a special exhibit drew visitors from across the galaxy. Protected under crystal preservation fields, a child's drawing rendered in colored wax held place of honor. Beside it, a simple plaque told the story of how the most feared military commander in 3 sectors had surrendered, not to superior firepower or brilliant strategy, but to the innocent wisdom of a child's art. The exhibit's title, chosen by Vortan himself, read simply, "The Power of Innocence." On quiet evenings, when official duties allowed, Vortan would sometimes visit the museum alone. Standing before the drawing, he would remember the boy he had once been, the man he had become, and the leader he was still learning to be. And sometimes, if visitors happened to pass by at just the right moment, they might glimpse the legendary admiral with his hand pressed against the preservation field, his expression not that of a conqueror or commander, but of someone finding their way home after a very long journey. In the stars above, vessels continued their eternal journeys between worlds. But now, instead of bringing fear, they carried stories of different peoples finding common ground, of strength found in cooperation rather than conquest, and of how the simplest art could sometimes change the course of history. For Kale Vortan, formerly the most feared man in 3 sectors, one truth had become clearer than all the strategic calculations that had once governed his life. The universe's greatest power was not found in weapons or warships, but in remembering the child we once were and listening to the children who would inherit the stars we touched.